Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you're tuning into this from. We're here with John Paller, executive steward and founder of Opolis, ETHDenver, and SporkDAO. Luis Cuende, co-founder of Aragon, and Professor Stephen Lupien, director the Center for Blockchain Digital Innovation at the University of Wyoming. My name is Joshua Lapidus. I'm a membership steward of Opolis, co-founder of SporkDAO, summoner of ChessDAO, and a steward of ETHDenver. And I'm here to moderate this panel on DAOs and governance. I think I'll turn it over to you guys first to give a brief 1 to 2 minute introduction on yourself, why you're excited to be here, and a little bit about the t-shirt that you're wearing.
Steve, why don't you go first, man?
Oh my gosh. Well, I am wearing the official Wyoming collared shirt and cowboy boots today. So don't have a fun t-shirt, but I am writing for the brand. I'm Professor Steve Lupien with the University of Wyoming. Wyoming has done some pretty amazing things from a legislative standpoint, and the University of Wyoming is obviously following suit as well too. And we've got a pretty robust blockchain and digital innovation infrastructure at the university, including degree programs in blockchain and digital innovations. So happy to be here, and next time I'll try to wear the uniform.
Well, I think you got the Wyoming DAO uniform just officially launched right now. It's the collared shirt and cowboy boots. That's that we're gonna meme the hell out of it until it comes into existence. You just watch out for the Twitter tags.
All right, I guilty as charged.
Luis, you want to go, or do you want me to go?
I can do it. So I'm the co-founder of Aragon. We picked up on I think Vitaly's work on defining what a DAO was in 2014 or so, and we launched the project in early 2017. So basically, no one knew what a DAO was, and we did a lot of trailblazer work to make people aware of what DAOs are. We tried to push it really, really hard, but it took a long while until finally, I think now with NFTs and fractalizing and dividing these NFTs into different ownership pieces, people are actually understanding what a DAO is finally. So it finally feels that we are living the DAO spring or DAO summer now, and that is really, really cool after all the years that we've been pushing DAOs forward. And some data, we got more than 1,600 DAOs that were created on the platform. Obviously, active, we have way less than that, but it's been more than 1,000 DAOs created, and more than $1 billion that have been managed in the AUM of these DAOs so far. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Over to you, John.
Cool.
Wait, tell me about your t-shirt.
Oh yeah.
Oh, t-shirt. I have the most boring gray t-shirt and also have the most boring white background. So I'm just going for very, very, very standard, non-distractive stuff over here.
All right.
So I guess it's me. I'm John Paller. I'm the executive steward of ETHDenver and the founder of both ETHDenver and Opolis and SporkDAO. I've been in the blockchain space since, full time since 2016. Before that, learning about decentralization, and then officially went down the rabbit hole in 2016. And there's just some things you can't unsee. So my work is largely in digital transformation and sort of the bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. We work a lot in the future of work, in organizing systems, trying to figure out how things are going to metamorphosize from currently how things like employment and investments and things like that exist, and then how we transform them to this new world. And so far, we've done some really interesting things. We're big fans of the Wyoming DAO legislation, although I have been, even to Steve, open about some, evolutions that we need to make there. We're also big fans of the Colorado cooperative law, which we feel like fits DAOs really well. And then I'm a big fan of just ethereal DAOs. I mean, I'm a member of several and including Chess DAO, which Josh spun up. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, John,
and my t-shirt is vintage 2019. This is an official ETHDenver event t-shirt. It's pretty much all I wear anymore. Not this exact t-shirt, but like I have so many event t-shirts that like I would probably not have to like put on the collar shirt and cowboy boots, except for you, Steve. I will do that.
Well, next time we bring you up here for Frontier Days, John, you're going to have to.
Don't worry, I got my Llcs in my closet, so like, don't worry, I got them. And
you brought up a great point that I just want to, before we get into questions, you brought up a great point about the Wyoming DAO legislation. I've been in the political side of not only, blockchain and cryptocurrency for a number of years here now in Wyoming, but, was an elected official in my previous life back east. And legislation is almost never perfect on the day it passes. And in fact, often you can't get perfect legislation passed because too many people will fight it. And legislation is almost always an iterative process. And, I think what Wyoming did with our DAO registration law, I think is an important step, but you're absolutely right, John. We've got a little bit of work to do, but you know what? We have something nobody else has.
So I'm highly aware. And that's one of the reasons why we love the Rocky Mountain region, is because we've got such a 1-2 punch going on with Colorado and Wyoming. So like, and your guys' willingness to actually take criticism and constructive feedback. A lot of people wouldn't. So good on you guys. Go ahead, Josh. What do you got, man?
Yeah. Before I dive into the questions, I'm going to say, I have a question about, the phrase protocol politician, but I have the alternative on my shirt, a Dowplomat. Well, I don't know which one will emerge, but that'll be interesting. Before we dive into this, for people who aren't familiar with DAOs, we should probably give them a brief definition. Does anybody want to take a shot real quick, and we'll agree or disagree on what is a DAO?
Well,
I think
Luis,
the simplest one is kind of like a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Luis, go ahead. You were like the pioneer in the beginning.
Yeah, we like asked ourselves this question 1,000 times, and like we had like a bunch of like very complex correct answers. But my favorite one actually is kind of like probably not completely technically correct, but it's like a shared internet piggy bank. I like that one because it's so simple. It's like 3 words: shared internet piggy bank. And not correct again, but fine, people get it.
That's a really interesting one. Actually, I hadn't heard that before.
Is the first word third?
What, Josh?
What kind of internet piggy bank?
Like a shared piggy bank.
Shared.
Or collaborative. You don't
shared.
say collaborative. Collaborative,
yeah,
kind of like, Yeah.
Shared internet piggy bank. So the thing I think is interesting about the name DAO is actually a pretty terrible name for what it actually describes. Like, at this stage, they're not really, decentralized in the sense that the purest form of a DAO is ethereal. So it doesn't actually have like some sort of legal standing or some sort of legal registration. You can have, if you had 185 members in a DAO from 185 countries, where should you register it? Who has jurisdiction? Right. But that's the Steve answer. That's the Wyoming answer. But like, if you ask the group, if you ask like regulators, it's like, who knows? Autonomous. I think we'll all agree that governance is anything but autonomous. Mm-hmm. And then organization is probably the one that might be the most, but it's collective, community, organization. It's certainly not a corporation. So whatever you want to call it, I think DAO has emerged as sort of the simplistic way of just communicating what it means, which shared internet piggy bank is pretty good. I think it's, it might just be a shared collective, or a collective effort of some sort. It could be a piggy bank to manage investments. It could be all sorts of different things that people might collaborate on. the DAO moniker is confusing. It's not that different from NFT, non-fungible token. What the hell is that? Like, nobody knows what that is, but we use it because, you know, people are just generally becoming familiar with what they are. So the concepts are more abstractly baked into like the name.
It's simply a look. The world is changing, and to what I believe is something better. And this is a way for organizations to organize in a new and different way. In Wyoming, it is a new type of legal structure, and it is a legal structure that could replace a traditional corporate organization structure or a limited liability company type of structure. And it takes advantage of this new ethos that John and Luis are talking about of how these organizations act and think differently than the organizations of the past acted and thought. So I think, as more and more jurisdictions around the world recognize the legal structure of DAOs, I think we'll begin to see adoption at a different level. I do want to take this opportunity to continue my commercial for Wyoming. Wyoming was the state that also invented limited liability company. And so we've got a history of doing firsts like this. And I think we all recognize the limited liability company now is pretty ubiquitous. And, I believe that this is the next evolution of that and for this new way of thinking.
So I'm going to you answered part of my first question, so I'm going to throw it right back to you to kick it off. It's a two-part question. So what do these shared internet piggy banks do better than other corporate structures or organizational structures in general? And when is a good time you think that a DAO would not be the best organizational structure? When should a community not use a DAO?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Like, DAOs do very well when it's about thousands of contributors that loosely organize. I think, there are obviously membership DAOs that are very small, and you can almost call them kind of like cooperatives. But like when we think about DAOs as like the vision and ethos for DAOs, I think they're very well suited for being something between a company and a common good, or something that manages a common good. And we usually talk about large groups of people that manage common goods, right? So, like in theory, they will be amazing for common goods and things that require kind of like more loose organization. If you need more like a startup structure with like a benevolent dictator, DAOs might not be for you. And if you want to move fast, also DAOs right now at least might not be for you as well.
Yeah, so I'll dovetail onto that. I mean, I see the world through a lens of game theory and incentive alignment. And the biggest thing that I think DAOs do is it creates more flexibility and better design frameworks for creating positive sum economic games. My biggest criticism of LLCs and corporations is that by default, they are designed to be competitive in nature, not just marketplace competitive, but they're extractive. And what I mean competitive there is, there's resources being extracted by investors from their community, which they don't call community, they call customers and vendors and whatever, but there are other stakeholders who aren't shareholders are the ones paying the bill on behalf of the shareholders. So it's problematic because these things are not sustainable. Eventually somebody gets pissed off. And this is where we have all sorts of historical examples to look at, and even present day examples where you've got, investors who put in $10 million into Lyft got $1.3 billion in return, but the average Lyft driver doesn't make minimum wage. So they're zero-sum games. So I think DAOs, the biggest difference between an organizational framework of an LLC or any sort of centralized governance structure and a DAO is we're actually moving into positive sum economic games with better alignment of game theory design incentives. So that has not been something where we've been able to align the selfish interest of the individual contributor or stakeholder with the collective. We don't have a governing design yet that's been able to do that historically. And I think to me, that's the biggest innovation.
No, I would agree. Both John and Louise are looking at this in very different perspectives, which I like. When you look at, to accomplish what John and Louise are talking about, which is that collective good, it is hard to do that in an old corporate structure. What's an old corporate structure? You got a president, you got a secretary, you've got, a hierarchical structure. And how do you make this new collective organization fit into an old world hierarchical structure? You can't. And so, what DAOs allow to happen is this new collective thinking to be reflected in the legal structure of your organization. I want to say company, in your organization, and to incorporate that greater good concept that Luis and John are talking about actually into the incorporation. I mean, when you register a DAO, again, Wyoming's the only place you can do this now, so it's the only place I'll be talking about in the U.S. And what you're essentially, instead of putting in your articles of incorporation that you would do for a corporate structure or an LLC, instead you're sending in your governance code. I mean, that's a very different way of thinking. And I think that's the important change here is you can't really make this new way of thinking fit that old structure. So those old structures need to be updated or changed in order to allow this collective good of an organization to be reflected in its legal structure.
And when should an organization not use a DAO? Let's get to the second part of the question.
I would say that an organization shouldn't use a DAO, like Luis said. Like if you need some sort of like hierarchical structure in order to execute whatever it is that you're doing. I mean, you could always have a core team in a DAO, but like if you have like those kinds of things, or if you're looking to, like, DAOs are shared value creation and shared piggy banks, right? So if you have a very shareholder mindset where you've got investors that want to protect their profits and not share it in sort of a stakeholder way with their other stakeholders aside from just people who are shareholders, I wouldn't use one. I mean, it's not something that is going to lend itself well to the kind of old school structural designs. I also wouldn't say that everything is going to need a DAO. I mean, there are going to be times that, like, you do have to, like, even certain public goods have to have some level of centralization. Like going full DAO is quite an undertaking, and you have to be able to let, the community, if you will, take on decision making and risk management and all of these things. It's not even the same sport as what you're used to in business. So traditional business, that is. So
a lot of what you just described is the way DeFi protocols, and also Luis, the way DeFi protocols work, where there is a top-down structure that's led by a team.
Well, I would say that they're not officially DAOs then. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to use
they call
traditional
themselves DAOs.
Well, sure. They call themselves DAOs because look, DAOs don't necessarily have to be open to the public either. I'm not going to comment necessarily on any one particular protocol governance design or like how they make decisions. But if it's like 5 or 6 core team people making decisions, probably not a DAO, If it's community representation, like steward led, like maybe Gitcoin, something like that, feels a lot more like a DAO. So I don't know. I think there's probably a spectrum, just like we talk about, the spectrum of decentralization, I mean, really, that's the kind of argument that we're probably having. There's certainly DAOs in the sense that they don't have a registered organization somewhere, and they're multinational. So like that part of it probably fits the test, but I don't know. There's a wide range.
Yeah, it's actually the SEC who defined the term sufficient decentralization, and they are pretty restrictive about it. Like basically, Bitcoin and Ethereum kind of like fit the test. But if we take that as the the test to see if a DAO is actually decentralized, then I think probably none of them today meet kind of like that very rigorous criteria. If we think about Bitcoin or Ethereum as DAOs, which they are kind of like DAOs, they don't require a lot of human input. Maybe Bitcoin even less than Ethereum in terms of the protocol being so simple, but they are DAOs nevertheless. And those are, I think, satisfy like every single letter of the word DAO. For the rest, I think we're still working towards it, right? That is completely normal because DAOs are like so young and so nascent. So in that sense, yeah, I think a lot of DAOs, and if you go to like groups or like guilds, they are even less decentralized and autonomous. They are kind of like more like groups of people or like on-chain cooperatives, which is fine. We are like exploring where DAO is still. So I think we shouldn't like solidify the term so much yet.
Yeah, we use the word digital cooperative quite a bit at Opolis, specifically for that reason. We've chosen to take a progressive decentralization approach because, number one, we didn't want to be disingenuous about like, oh, we're a DAO. There's certain things about decentralizing employment, which is a legal sport into itself, that like you just couldn't do as a DAO right out the gate. Right. And we have like member thresholds that as we get to certain sizes, we progressively, move more and more off of the cooperative, so the underlying legal framework that we used is a cooperative specifically for this sort of evolution, but to maintain benevolence while we do it. So there isn't like, some corporate board or, shareholders that control everything. The members still control it and own it.
Yeah, you'll see a great deal of evolution, as we were talking about, early on in this panel, is that, the legal structures always take time to catch up to the way the world is moving. You let me rephrase that. You rarely have legal structures leading. You almost always have legal structures kind of following. And so we'll see a great deal of change, I think, in the way DAOs are created and governed and operate, but I think that's also going to change as we as beings change the way we think. We don't, from an organizational standpoint, we already don't think the same way today that we necessarily did 100, 150 years ago, and so I think you'll start seeing that reflected in the way organizations operate. And I do agree. I think that the term cooperative is a much better way of defining the true goals of these. And but it'll take the legal structure a little bit of time to keep catching up with each of these evolutionary steps.
So this leads into something that I know John likes talking about, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When do you think more people will work with DAOs than for corporations? Getting to this evolution you're talking about.
Well, that's an interesting question. And again, I think it goes back to something the panel was talking about earlier, which is DAOs are not necessarily the perfect golf club for every stroke. And, I think as the world changes, we'll see, an evolution more towards that. I think in the last, 2 years, we've seen a pretty significant difference in the way the world works. And I mean works as in vocational work. We are much more working, from our homes. We are much more able to work for ourselves. The gig economy continues to grow. And I think that's going to bring about, some change as well too. When you think back, again, I don't want to sound like a stodgy old college professor here in a collared shirt, but when you think back, 200 years ago, most people didn't work for corporations. Most people, were, sole proprietors, being a blacksmith or, doing something kind of on their own in their own communities. And then with the Industrial Revolution, we ended up moving into cities where we began working for more centralized organizations. Oddly enough, I think we're to some extent devolving in that front. We are all participating in something today online from either our homes or our local offices that 3 or 4 years ago we would have hopped on a plane, flown to a conference, and done differently. So, Joshua, I think from an organizational legal standpoint, when will that happen? No guess, but I think we're already on the path to changing the way we work. And that, I think, is the beginning of what you would need to start evolving more people towards DAO types of organizations.
So go ahead, Luis.
No,
go ahead.
You go ahead this time. You go ahead this time around.
Okay. Well, I'll give you some statistics. 88% of the U.S. labor force worked for themselves. Mm-hmm. And then, you're right. The Industrial Revolution, the Great Depression, World War II, the auto industry, the steel industry, the oil industry, all created this, huge. The reason for that, though, was the hope of safety and security. Mm-hmm. So individuals were being promised this better life. And for a while, they were given that, right? Really? I mean, there was absolutely what I call it was the age of mutuality and reciprocity. There was a time when corporations were somewhat benevolent and very protective of their labor force. And you saw the loyalty, the trust that, manifested itself in 30, 40-year careers, right? So that wasn't uncommon for the greatest generation, right? So that would be the World War II generation. But now that social contract of trust has been put in a blender and shredded and all sorts of things. And whether it's Enron or the crash of 2008, or it's even COVID that give illustration to this, but the MBA age of the 1960s has actually moved big business into hyper optimization and dehumanization of our corporations, right? So human resources is what we call our people departments now, right? It's very sterile and very, very uncool. And in my opinion, it's very inhumane. So I think what's happened is the youngest generations, if you watch the statistics, over 50% of them are already working independently. That's the Gen Zers, the Zoomers. Mm-hmm. And it's only going to get more pronounced as we see, retirements and then new entrants into the labor force. More and more people don't want that. Now, why? Because they value freedom and flexibility more than they do safety and security.
Right.
So they don't want to handcuff themselves to a corporation. They don't want to be subjugated to the outcomes that their parents and grandparents suffered, like layoffs and miserable lives and just being a cog in the wheel. They don't feel moved and inspired by it. So the purpose economy, which is largely what if you really get down to the granularity of what is important to younger workers, they want to feel purposeful in what they're doing commercially. Mm-hmm. They want to feel emotionally connected to the things that they're doing. They want to experience variety. This is the future of what DAOs are going to offer. Right now, people are just floating around independently doing this. But the future of work will be absolutely commonplace to see people with 5 and 6 different revenue streams contributing to different things, having the replication of all the features and benefits that they need to do this, but it will just be seen as work. It won't have to be the future of work. It's just going to be the next generation of it. So 100% agree that we're going to see a major shift in the next 15 years when the remainder of the baby boomer population are out of the labor force. I mean, and then the next youngest generation, whatever's behind the Zoomers, I don't even know what that is actually, now that I think about it. Whatever generation is next Gen Z 1, who knows? But like, it's going to be even more pronounced. So the prediction is in the US alone, and I think this would be correlated to a global statistic, 90 million or over half of the US labor force is going to be working independently by 2028. And my prediction is a lot of them will be working in DAOs and digital collectives and cooperatives and all sorts of sort of high frequency, high fluidity, global type work opportunities.
You're going to laugh at what the generation's actually called. That's what it's the thing that we are.
What is it?
That we all look for every single day. Alpha.
Alpha. Is it really?
Generation Alpha is going to find this.
Oh, well, that's actually a good meme. I think that's going on Twitter later. I'm tagging all of you right now.
It was written in the stars.
Yeah, that's really funny. Actually, to add to those points, because I think they were like super interesting trends. There are a couple other trends that are interesting. One of them, I think, is how like work and output is switching from being linear. So like, every person has kind of like the same unit of productivity from 9 to 5, and we all work like kind of like machines, being like super creative, to realizing that actually work and meaningful work is like anything but linear. So basically, if you're creative, you can do an amazing breakthrough in an hour that then kind of like takes you further to like the equivalent of 1 year working 9 to 5 maybe without that breakthrough. And so people, I think, now realizing more and more that we can automate the hell out of most mechanical things, and we can actually focus on being human and being creative, which is what's really sets us apart from like machines or other beings. And I think that's super interesting. The other trend that I'm like not sure about, because I'm still kind of like I'm not that young, I guess, to like feel it. I would be curious to like meet a 14-year-old kid and ask them about these things, but like is how work and games are merging. So like there are this bunch of like parallel universes now where people kind of like play to work to play. Like, I don't even know, like they just kind of like go in there and they build worlds, but those worlds have some kind of like tangible output that like makes money and creates value. And that is kind of like mind blowing. I don't even know if it's like healthy from a pure kind of like health, mind health standpoint to merge everything so much, but we're going there. So we might as well just embrace it.
Well, I think we might as well embrace it because the trends are clear. And again, I see almost everything through a lens of game design and game theory incentives. And whether we want to admit it or not, most everything we do right now is already a game. It's just not that fun. And it's sort of survival. It's sort of survival based games, but the incentives, the inputs, the outputs are all game design, right? So I think what you're saying is we're going to see the convergence of almost an entertainment quality coming into work, right? Where what we do is actually in fun and creative and it feels more like a game than it does work. I absolutely think that that's going to happen. In fact, we talk about this, the great automation, right? So where machines and AI and all these other things are going to come and abstract away a lot of these sort of low-hanging activities. Well, what's going to be left? Well, it all boils down to creativity, right? Every human being is endowed with this unique creativity. And the way that we've designed work today diminishes that. It hides it. It separates the person from their own sort of essence in a way, because it's my work compartment, right? Bullshit. It's just life. It's just life. How do we unlock that creativity? Imagine what GDP would do if we actually had more people engaged with work, right? But if work actually felt more like play and we were just creating value by engaging our own unique creativity in these different kind of vectors of opportunity. I mean, I think that'd be really powerful. Plus, here's the punctuation that I'll put on this. So, Luis, you talked about this creativity. You're the one who brought it up. This is one of my favorite topics because I've been in employment and HR tech systems for 20 years. I've personally W-2'd 35,000 people in 40 US states. I've seen it. I've seen a lot. I never say I see it all, because tomorrow I'm going to see some crazy shit and I don't want to see it. So like, I've seen a lot of stuff. And what I would say is it is an absolute travesty that 70% of people, and this is again a US statistic, but probably correlated to global, 70% are sitting in roles that they hate. They're doing work that they're actively disengaged from.
Mhm.
Now, what do we think that actually means towards their unique creativity? They're not expressing it. They're not living it. They're probably miserable. There's a huge joy deficiency in the way that we engage with work. So I think DAOs and what they can create for this fluidity, this sort of high frequency opportunities of global work opportunities and organizing with like-minded people that share your own kind of worldview. We've done very poorly at geographic organizing. I mean, the nation state is deprecating, and even local communities, like most of my friends are online, and I'm not a young dude. Okay. So like, I'm not in my 20s. Okay. Like my neighborhood, like I don't have a lot in common right now with some of the people that I live around. Okay. And it's not that I don't like them. It's just that like this new age of being able to kind of with freedom and flexibility, organize digitally in a high frequency manner with people that share my same skill sets or my same values, not skill sets, values and sort of worldview, is incredibly fueling of my own creativity, right? So I feel much more integrated with things that are important to me in the work that I do now. And I think that's just going to become pronounced. So again, imagine the value creation that's going to be scaled up in these new organizations when people actually tap in to their own creativity and joy. I think it's going to change everything.
And it'll change, I think the other thing it'll change, to continue the term decentralization, I'm probably the oldest one on the call here. You followed a very traditional path in your career. You went to school, then you moved to a city and you found a job at a corporation and you commuted from the city to the suburbs if you became successful. I think that, I think that's changing radically as well too. And I think rural communities and I'll take this internationally as well too, places that are not economic centers, are no longer where you have to go to be successful and, to John's point, find your self-actualization. You can, essentially, be, in a garage anywhere or at a dining room table anywhere and do something that you truly enjoy that brings you value. And so I think we're going to start seeing that shift as well too. I mean, I'm a former New Yorker before I moved to Wyoming, and I talked to my friends about how New York has changed in this new COVID era. And I wonder if cities like New York are truly going to come back to what they were, because I don't think they have to anymore. You don't have to be in an office in New York anymore. And I think that's going to change the way the world operates, because if we're all in a digital economy and we're all working, in a digital sort of way, code doesn't care where you are. Code doesn't care if you're in sub-Saharan Africa. Code doesn't care what your race is. Code doesn't care what your gender is. All code cares about is whether it works. And I think that's going to be a big change in the way the world operates as well too, and certainly a change to the better.
Which I think is a good place to pivot to. What do you think will become possible in the next 5 to 10, 15 years in DAOs that isn't possible today?
Geez, anyone who can guess that. I think what
give us that alpha.
I mean, I think we are in an amazing time of and John said it so eloquently earlier about how we can now, if we can untap everyone's creativity. Think of those, what was it, 70% of people, John, in jobs they hate? What if those 70% of people started tomorrow doing something they loved? How would the world change?
Look, I think I'm sort of a little bit of a, I don't know, I'm an INFJ, if you know what that is. Okay. So an INFJ in terms of the MBTI is a very altruistic, sort of like hope-filled, lovey-dovey kind of person. Okay. Now I'm not unrealistic about this. I have sort of I've been there, done that, walked through the valley of the shadow of death as an entrepreneur kind of perspective. Mm-hmm. But I would say that, you know, in an ideal world, assuming that people actually took the opportunity in front of them to tap into their creativity, I think there is a large component of human frailty that many will not. Okay. It will take some generational time to heal some of these wounds. Okay. But I would say if that were to happen, I mean, look, depression, anxiety, worry, stress, all of these things, these are byproducts of humans being out of alignment with their truth, right? With their joy. And if people are actually doing things that they find joyful, a lot of the other things that are sort of weighing on them emotionally, physically, and spiritually have a tendency to kind of be subsided a little bit. I mean, if you really are doing what you love and you feel integrated with that, you feel purposeful around doing it, it's literally going to change. It would change everything. Now, I think about this in terms also of scaling value. Okay, so think about the inverse of the value creation of 70% disengagement. I would say that our optimization of value creation is very low. To quote my friend Peter Gibbons, I do just 15 minutes of actual work in any one day just to not get fired, right? With his meeting with the Bobs. If everybody knows the quote, you got to be old enough to know the quote. Yep. But like, it's sort of funny, but it's so true, right? So if that's the actual productivity that people are putting in, just going through the motions, this sort of means to an end, sort of paycheck culture kind of stuff that we do. I mean, imagine if people were actually producing value, like, and actually creating their value for themselves and for a community simultaneously. We would see digital organizations scale to $10 trillion. We already are. I mean, to Luis's point earlier, Bitcoin and Ethereum are kind of like DAOs. They are digital communities with memes and all sorts of shit posting and all sorts of other new age marketing stuff going on. Like, this is already happening. And we're going to see, we haven't even seen it yet. We're going to see $20 trillion organizations that are loosely affiliated digital orgs, right? And people are going to be creating immense amounts of value, whether they're creator DAOs or software development DAOs or, you know, even real estate agent DAOs. It won't matter. Okay. Like, there's going to be all sorts of opportunities for people to plug into things that just change the dynamics entirely. So in my mind, like, it really fundamentally shifts the human experience, because right now, I mean, it has at least the hope of that. I mean, unless we bastardize it, which human beings have been known to do, if it gets co-opted by corporate interests or some sort of centralization or governments that think that they know better, like, yeah, it's not going to be good. But like, if in the purest sense of the vision, we actually realize this, I think we're all in for a huge raise in standard of, you know, quality of life, standard of living, and just global scaling of value.
Speaking of participation, what mechanisms do you guys have worked or not worked for encouraging long-term DAO participation? Like, is there a secret sauce to ensuring that users participate with DAOs long-term and in a sticky way?
So far, one thing that I've seen that works, that we're actually not doing in Aragon, but we should, is when you can very easily see who is voting. So it kind of like goes against like anonymity in a way, but when you can see like who proposed something, who is voting for something, and you can see like their Twitter photo and their profile and stuff like that, I think it kind of helps build this community sentiment. I don't know how I feel about it in terms of anonymity, because in an ideal world, all of this just goes anonymous. But it's an interesting thing to like build smaller communities that people feel a part of.
It's interesting that we've done that with like ENS helps to the ENS domains have helped to kind of like take away some of that anonymity. But this goes into another question that I want to kind of add because we're running a little bit low on time. But DAOs need to have this civil resistance, so someone's not increasing their number of votes. So how do you couple this, the need for being doxed to each other inside of the DAO while remaining anonymous or pseudonymous outside of the DAO, so the public can't just see your entire bank account?
Well, I think most people are smart enough to not park all of their assets in the account that they're using to vote. So, I mean, whether they do or they don't, I don't know. I mean, it's a tough question. I mean, ask Kevin Owocki at Bitcoin about this. I mean, this is what he's spending a lot of his time trying to solve, is the civil resistance problem and making, fraud and collusion, less doable. It's a really hard question. I'm not sure, for purposes of this panel, I want to get into the technical questions of that. I think in theory, there's a balance in all things, right? Like, this is one of the lessons that I've learned over 20 years of entrepreneurship, is usually the answer is somewhere in the center. It's not going to be hyper anonymization and like privacy and like nobody will ever know who I am. And it's like all going to be that. Yeah. I mean, for like a hardcore Bitcoin maxi, okay, I get it. But like, is it going to be a practical sort of thing for the world to operate that way? Probably not. On the other end of it, like full blown, transparency and doxability and like KYC and AML and all this sort of, probably not. Like, that's not doable either, right? Because it creates a whole rigid structure of control mechanisms that just are going to stifle everything. So it's somewhere in the middle. I'm not sure exactly what it is, and I'll just leave it there.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think we, and this is so new that we're all still figuring it out. And so one thing I will guarantee you is what this looks like in 3 and 5 years is going to be different than what we're looking at today.
Oh, well, 3 months.
Fair point.
I mean, when I say that I've been in crypto since 2016 and Luis was like thinking about Aragon in 2014, I don't know about you guys, but it feels like a lifetime ago. It feels like a whole nother, it feels longer ago than maybe high school did for me. It feels like forever. So I don't know. It's just a weird, acceleration and iteration process. I've never seen anything like it move this quickly. Yeah, I've been around entrepreneurs for a long time, so I've nothing even comes close to it.
Yeah, well, when we all got into crypto, the governance tokens weren't a thing yet. So this is new for this cycle. What all right, hit me with the pros and cons. Governance. Does this governance model that kind of obfuscates the security thing, does it stick around? How much longer before we have to pivot again?
Well, I think you're going to see a different version of identity emerge. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to see zero knowledge identity, where you're basically going to have some sort of oracle, if you will, or benevolent authority who basically isn't a government, but somebody who can verify identity off chain, that basically gives you on chain permission to do all sorts of different stuff. That way you don't have to dox your identity. You don't have to come out of the closet and say who you are and what you do on chain or even in the community. But you can choose different levels of obfuscation, and you could choose different levels of accreditation. And that way there's sort of a zero knowledge trust proof that could be built into your identity. That would be, for example, we're thinking about this at Opolis. So if you know anything about employment verification, it acts very much like KYC and AML, but it's not a government or an investment type of thing. It's a, right to work kind of thing, a qualification to work. Well, if it achieves the same thing and this employment protocol knows who you are and it's employing you and you're a member owner of it, right? Why couldn't you use that activity as some sort of verification for other online activity that without having to give anything up? I mean, you could basically just say, Opolis, little POAP badge or whatever it might be, some NFT that sits on your digital ID. And they would be like, oh, okay, well, we can trust this person because if you have that Opolis badge, then you're going to be trustable for these particular reasons and these particular activities. I think that those kinds of compromises are going to be the norm. Whether our approach at Opolis is the right one or not, I have no idea. I just think it's a big opportunity given that employment acts a lot like investment verification without actually having to do anything new. I mean, we're already doing this stuff anyway to pay taxes. So we might as well do it and use it for much more constructive means.
I mean, John, you bring up a great point. And it's kind of funny. I was just having a conversation over the weekend about this. And how many of us use LinkedIn to validate if who somebody is and if are they really who they claim they are? And I and the conversation was, yeah, but doesn't anyone can just create a fake LinkedIn profile. Yeah, but to use a comment John uses all the time, game theory kicks in. I also look at how many connections they have. It's real hard to fake a LinkedIn connection and have 1,000 connections versus somebody who fakes a LinkedIn profile and has 100. Game theory plays itself out there too. I mean, is there a way to hack that? I don't know, but frankly, and the answer is yes. But I'm just saying again, for our purposes, it works great. And for what John is describing, where some third-party entities could act as your online identifier. I think that's I think that's probably the direction we're going to be heading in as well too. And we at the university are looking at different methods of digital identity and how you bring about that very balance that we're talking about here. How do I assure that you have to give up enough information about yourself so that people know you're real without doxing yourself. And where is that balance? And and I think there's systems will evolve that'll solve that problem.
That's a very good point. I'd like to move us into final thoughts. Is there any 30 seconds or less? What is the last thing you'd like to leave our audience with?
I think that those are the new paradigm for organizing people to do work and to make our societies wealthier and better. So we're going to look at something that resembles, how the companies appeared back in the day. And I think we're going to need a lot of good communicators around it. It's really hard to get this message across. It's going to take time, a lot of time.
I'll just leave with, the world is changing rapidly. We've joked about it on this panel about it's not 3 to 5 years, it's 3 months. This is the next evolution of how people or entities will organize in this new economy. And our DAO is perfect now? No, but will they evolve? Absolutely. Will they impact most of our lives in one way or another, either being one or interacting with one? I absolutely do believe that.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, assuming this audience and knowing that there's a lot of curiosity around DAOs now, it kind of reminds me, we announced 2020 as the year of the DAO at ETHDenver. And I kind of take the mulligan on 2020 anyway, because it kind of doesn't feel like it existed. But 2021, I think, is absolutely the year of the DAO. And whether that trickles into 2022, it's very likely that it will. I think that DAOs, are less hypey than the other stuff that we've seen come out of blockchain, the craze in ICOs in 2017 and NFTs and profile pictures. There's a lot of hype and FOMO stuff. I think DAOs are much more sort of like blue chip crypto, which is I think going to fundamentally tectonically shift things more. But there's so much more to do. There's a lot of more moving parts and pieces. So my encouragement to the audience is, just dig in, learn as much as you can, find a DAO that sort of fits something that you're interested in, join it, participate. The best way to learn, in my experience, is by doing. What I know about any of this stuff has come from hands-on tactical working in the trenches with teams, projects, and communities that are actually building this stuff. The acceleration of learning for me has been unbelievable, much less much better than anything that I could have done on my own, or like studying books or watching videos or any of that stuff. So jump in. It's a new world. And, in my estimation, if you do it with intentionality, you'll never regret it. Going down the road of like this future of where everything is going in the world of crypto blockchains, organizing systems is fascinating and will absolutely blow your mind.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Professor Lupien, and thank you, Luis, for being here for this panel. My name, I'm 0x Joshua. We'll all see you in the metaverse.
Nice talking with you, y'all. Bye-bye now.
Nice talking.
Bye now. Bye, guys.